In at number 10, we've got the Crystal Wyvern, and you could say just the regular Wyvern as well. It's just I kind of have a preference for Crystal Wyverns, so I'm just going to put them on the list instead of the normal Wyverns. But, you know, if you don't really like the Crystal Wyverns for whatever reason, then normal Wyverns it is. And actually, it is a very well-known fact that Wyverns are pretty much the fastest land flyers out there. These things have insane agility when it comes to actual just flying, gliding not included, even though there are obviously a lot of gliders in this list and that does count as a more speedy tame. But in the sake of just flying around, these things are actually pretty speedy when it comes to it for obviously that main flying. They're faster than the Pteranodon and a Tapijara, of course, and way faster than something like the Quetzal. That is an insanely slow creature. And even though you can't level up movement speed anymore for flyers without obviously enabling flyer speed leveling or with the classic flyers mod, obviously those two options accessible on single player only unless you're a host of a server, these things are still going to offer a great amount of speed, and you're really not going to be worrying about the speed of these things, considering that they are definitely some really fast tames, and considering how easy the Crystal Wyverns are, they are a really great option for your first flyer on Crystal Isles. Next up, we've got the Runa Gatha, and this is definitely one of the newer flyers which has been added into Ark, but it definitely does need to be put on this list for many reasons, namely because of the speed. Actually, there's not really many reasons. It's speedy. That is how the Runa Gatha works. And if you didn't know already, it spawns on the island and the Lost Island. There are your only two maps and your only options. On ASA as well, just as a little bonus, they are nowhere near as rare to find unless obviously you're playing on the normal version of Ark. Then, well, I can't really say normal, they're both normal, but the old version of Ark has a much rarer Runa Gatha spawn than the new one, and actually it seems a bit like an overspawn for the new one. There just seems to be Runa Gathas everywhere, but you can always raise your dino count, use the destroy wild dinos command if you want to tame yourself a Runa Gatha on the older version of Ark and you're on a single player world and you have access to those commands, of course. But how do you actually tame one of these things as well? And this is the only creature on this list which I'm really going to talk about its tame method in great detail because it's quite a difficult one. In terms of what you do, you kill a male Runa Gatha to get that pheromone, then tame yourself a Bronto or equivalent creatures that work. Bronto's the best. Get all those resources on screen, not necessary of course, only optional. You only need them if you want 100% effectiveness, and for these things I don't really think it matters all too much. Then you'll want to trap your Runa Gatha and damage it as much as you can. Obviously, don't kill it, that would be absolutely awful and a huge waste of time in actually trapping the creature and just the creature itself, especially on the old version of Ark, considering how rare these things actually are on that version of the game. And you may need to give it some additional hits as well, because these things do actually heal ridiculously quick. Then you want to feed that pheromone gland to whatever creature you're doing, and then this is the time where you want to get out all of those craving resources and have them ready in your inventory, as your creature is going to need them during the process, which is just about to happen after this, which is where your dino is impregnated by the Runa Gatha. That's when the cravings will happen. Afterwards, it will roll over and your creature will die, which, you know, could be a little bit sad. Don't bring the most important one. And then out comes a baby Runa Gatha. Now, the Griffin is making an appearance on the list, and for good reason, mainly because of that gliding ability, being a prime choice for doing any kind of Wyvern Trench raids on Ragnarok and other maps where these things spawn, which also Wyverns spawn on. And Valguero is no, I don't know actually. Valguero does have the Griffin Trench, but either way, especially on Ragnarok, I should have just stuck to that example. These creatures are very widely used for those Wyvern Trench runs, and for good reason, considering their insane gliding speed. And this does have a bit of movement speed on it, by the way. This isn't the actual speed, but this is the early days of B-roll, and this is actually the first piece of B-roll which I ever recorded for the channel, and it's still kicking around today. Actually, there's a nice little memory of when I started doing the top 10s, and there's actually audio attached to this as well. But obviously that has been muted as I'm talking over it with me now, because me about 6 months ago, for some reason I'm ridiculously slow at talking. But also, on top of the Griffin's insane speed, don't know why that's so hard to say, these things are also really great at dealing damage as well, and that glide ability can also inflict damage onto the creatures as well. If you dive bomb them, I think that's what it's called, and you'll see it being used here, and it is actually a pretty useful tactic and a very unpredictable one if you're going up some players in Ark, which, you know, may be somewhat predictable if people know the Griffin, but you can definitely be very sneaky with those glide attacks, and again, very, very great for doing any kind of Wyvern trench runs. You can get quickly in there and quickly out with no trouble whatsoever. In at number 7, we have the Managa, and this creature definitely does have to be put on the speedy tames list, and I think for this creature being a speedy tame, it definitely does make sense. Like, this creature can absolutely zip across the map, although it does have a slight kind of learning curve to it, so I'm not actually going to put it as high as maybe it could have ranked. And also, I don't know, I'm not really kind of into this creature as much as some of the other creatures, and I don't think that as useful of a speedy creature, which is why some creatures like the Gallimimus I'm just not going to put on this list, partly because there are definitely some faster creatures out there, but I don't really enjoy using them, and the Managa is kind of one of those, and considering its bugginess as well, I don't think it is the fastest when you really take everything into comparison, although it definitely is a very speedy tame and worthy of this list. You just might say the creature after it and the one after that is just a little bit slower than it, and maybe you could say that, but over longer distances those creatures are going to hold up a lot better than this thing. This is definitely more of a short burst distancing creature, but also with their freeze ability they are definitely very useful, not just for speed but also for freezing things, which is a surprisingly OP ability actually, considering how long these things freeze other creatures for. The only thing to watch out for is the bugs. Next up we've got the Snow Owl, and this is one of the most revolutionary flyers out there in my opinion, and it is so widely used by every Ark player that has ever set eyes on one of these creatures, and I'm pretty sure they're available on Fjorda as well, not just on Extinction, so you can dig into these creatures even more if you are on any of those maps. Of course, Extinction and Fjorda I think are the only two maps where these things spawn. The reason why I'm mentioning that is Extinction is a paid DLC map and Fjorda is a free one, so it is a lot more accessible, and I know a lot of you down there who watch these videos do actually play Fjorda, so you know it kind of makes sense why I'd mention that. But obviously their main speed does come from that gliding ability, which is very similar to the Griffins, but it always just seems faster and with a lot more agility than the Griffin, and there's kind of a tier list to it, as the next creature is a glider, the next one after that as well is a glider, but with even more speed, and even the creature which is in at number 1 is a glider as well, so there's definitely something to be said for this method of travel. And as well, they do have a sort of heat-seeking ability to spy out any people who might be trying to raid your base in a PvP scenario, or any creatures which may be missing in a PvE one. You also want to level up that stamina so you can heal these creatures up so quickly, as obviously that is something which is going to be essential in any kind of boss fight or battle, obviously, because you're going to want to heal up those creatures quickly and efficiently, and you can do it somewhat more efficiently than the Daedon, and especially on Extinction you can actually keep that creature alive, as the Daedon really isn't going to rack up against any of the Titans. But it's also useful if you're taming a creature and its health is really low. Then if it's wild, obviously it's not yours, you can't heal it with a Daedon, but you can heal it with a Snow Owl, which is just a nice little thing as well. And with their pellets on top of that too, these things can gather insane loot out of any kind of gacha, which is definitely something to be said, and something which is a very nice thing to have, which no other Ark creature can offer. And if you do have Extinction or Fjorda, definitely go for the Snow Owl. In at number 5 is the Desmodus, and this creature is yet again another glider along the glider tier list, as this one feels even more fast than the Snow Owl, and with even more agility and some nicer abilities to go on top of that as well. although the speed is the main thing which we're going to be talking about here, again with that gliding ability, and the fact that the stamina drain is also very minimal as well. Like the snow owl, it definitely does benefit these creatures hugely, and I do really enjoy the speed which you can get out of a creature like this, and also the gliding doesn't seem too far off primitiveness, which is always a nice thing to have in Ark, because I don't particularly like all the techie creatures, although the creature in at number 2 is a kind of techie one, but still I kind of prefer the primitiveness of this creature and the kind of Nordicness of it as well, considering that Fjorda is a very Nordic map. It's a nice quality for this creature to have, and again with that glide ability you can get some serious speed out of these things. Next up we've got the Rock Drake, and yet again another glider, this time packing a lot of punch in terms of the damage department. You should really look at this thing. It deals so much damage in terms of actually like its damage to size ratio and damage to speed ratio is frankly stupid in terms of actually just how powerful this creature is, but it really does make it a very useful one. And although not the greatest on maps that aren't Arboretion, it definitely has to be said to be a fast creature, and definitely one of the faster ones in the game, obviously being even above the top 5 in this list that we've got here today, which obviously mean it must be fast. I'm not giving you the best example here considering I'm in quite flat terrain, but the stamina drain is pretty low, so when these things are actually in some proper serious action they can glide for a long while. And also on top of that, they can grab onto any kind of walls, and also they can kind of zoom onto walls as well, as long as they are close enough to them. And obviously when your HUD is enabled, which it isn't here just for the sake of the b-roll, you'll get a little crosshair on your screen when obviously you can grapple on to those rock faces. So it's not like you just have to spam click buttons and then as soon as you get close enough, there you go, you can now click on it, but you don't really know when you're close enough. No, it is quite obvious to tell because of that marker. Just for the sake of the b-roll, I've turned the HUD off, so obviously that isn't there, although it is pretty easy to judge with your eyes as well. Just, you know, a little bit of assistance is nice. And if you haven't already, definitely go and tame yourself the Rock Drake. You'll have an absolute blast with this thing. In at number 3 is the Blood Stalker, the living Spider-Man. This creature definitely is one when it comes to any form of agility, and it really can't be backed down for that skill, and it is one which actually hardly any other, if not any other, spider in Ark possesses, as the Aranio is one of the most downright useless creatures out there. But it is also really quick and agile on the surface of the water and under the water too, which can't be said to some other creatures on this list, and it definitely is one of the more versatile ones, being used for a wide range of things. And I actually use it mainly underwater, as it is a really viable underwater tame. But obviously with this really fast grappling, it makes it one of the fastest creatures out there, as it can really quickly zip between any kind of tool objects, and it can't just grapple onto trees, it can grapple onto many other things as well. And the range of the limit on what it can grapple to is absolutely insane as well. It's not like you can only grapple onto things which are really close to you. It's probably at least maybe 50 to 100 meters, which is actually a substantial amount, and it could even be more than that. I haven't really measured any of it. And there is a huge benefit to this as well, as you get yourself a really great agile travel mount, but also on Gen 1 there are missions which you'll benefit from for having faster Blood Stalker flying skills. The alpha one of which I have done, as well as the gamma and the beta ones too, but the alpha one obviously does offer the most hexagons, and those are an extremely useful virtual resource on an already virtual game, but you know, doubly virtual, very useful on Gen 1. In at number 2 is the Astrod Delphus, but also the Tropicus. I'm just going to shoehorn them both in together, as they kind of move in the exact same way, although the Astrocetus is a kind of main one here. But Tropicus I'm going to put as a little honorable mention, as it is an extremely fast tame as well, and you know, it didn't really make the list in terms of what the B-roll says, but I'm saying it also goes here too. They kind of go hand in hand with each other, as they use a fuel which adds to their saddle, and then they can travel at absolutely insane speeds across the map. And it really doesn't seem like it may be traveling this fast at this time, but considering that these things fly consistently and they only stop when they run out of fuel, it's insane over long distances, and it really is a very viable one. And considering with the Tropicus it can gain speed as it points further down, it does have a huge benefit as well, and so can the Astrod Delphus increase its speed as well. And on top of that, fire all kinds of lasers like the Tropicus with all kinds of grenades, and these really are fighting machines of the air, and they have to be pretty much the fastest out there in the game. Obviously only beaten by the creature in at number 1. But what actually is that creature? In at number 1 just had to be the Mwing. This creature is one of the fastest, if not the fastest creature in the game, and it kind of has to be considering I'm putting it in at the number 1 spot. Sorry Syntac, the galley just simply doesn't make the cut. But either way, in terms of this thing, it is probably the most efficient glider out there, and with also the fact that its saddle is unlocked at level 19, it really does have something to be said that you can have this so early on in the game, and it is the best travel mount out there in my opinion, and actually the fastest travel mount really out there in my opinion. And you may be able to get a creature which can go faster for a short amount of time, but over long distances these creatures are going to be your biggest friend with absolutely insane traveling speeds, obviously increasing as you shoot further down like the Tropicus and the Astrod Delphus, but I think this is even faster than all of those, and I really do credit its speed, especially considering the level it is unlocked at. And also it does act as a feeding trough as well, which is just a nice little ability to have, and actually it doesn't really do that bad on same elevation terrain, which some other gliders really do struggle with. And obviously it can gather berries too, which is just a nice little bonus which I think we all really need to appreciate. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you all enjoyed this one, as I did really enjoy making it. And as always, comment down below what is the fastest Ark creature in your opinion, and I'll see you all later.